Our next topic hones in on sustainable transportation and the opportunities available given that we get it right. Sweden is home to I want to make that point, two very successful truck manufacturers. We get to listen to one of them today, but what I find fascinating is that these two truck manufacturers have taken two very different paths in terms of how to provide sustainable transportation. And it's not only what's driving on the roads that's of importance, but also how we see road planning in the future. I'm sure that our fireside chat can crack into that. And to our help, we have Ben Roth, who is a director at Volvo Cars UK. Ben and the panel, welcome up. Good luck.
Nice touch.
Thank you, everyone. So from talking about the grid in the last conversation, I think we're going to be talking a bit more about what that grid needs to power in the future and all the exciting developments that are going on within this space. So I'd like to welcome James and Tanya. If you'd like to just introduce yourselves briefly, a bit about what you do in your organisations, and then we can move into a bit of conversation.
Shall I go first? Yeah, hi everyone. So my name is Tanya. I'm responsible for sustainability at Scania, and that covers a wide range of things. So from what we're doing as a company and the impact that we're having, and also our products and services and the impact that they're going to have, obviously, when they leave us. So quite a big remit, but it's an exciting space to be in, and it's a really, really good place to be at the moment. To you, James.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. James Padden from the Department for Transport, UK Government. Where I'm head of Future Roads Technology, which encompasses quite a range of different stuff, but it largely is focused around electric, sustainable stuff at the moment.
And as mentioned in the introduction, I'm here representing Volvo UK today, so I'm going to be relatively quiet as the moderator. But as many of you will know, Volvo's ambition is to be 100% electric by 2030, and within the UK, we're well on the way to that ambition with many of our initiatives we're doing here strategically. So today our focus is, as mentioned, on electrification, it's on alternative fuels, and we're thinking differently about transportation. So we've got some really interesting angles to explore over the next 20 minutes or so. We've got quite a diverse panel, so I'm hoping we'll get some different opinions and different views and some food for thought. So in terms of this journey, in terms of the new emerging mobility solutions and that diversification, how do each of your organisations see this journey at the moment, and where do you see it heading? Should we start with Tanya?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that we're quite new in terms of the space that we're in, but in terms of the company that we are, you know, it's a 120-year-old company that have been living and breathing, kind of diversifying our product and accelerating change in our company. So we're new in the space today, but we're well established in terms of who we are as a company. So it's things like, I suppose having a science-based target for us has been a really important stage in what we've been doing, because it gives us that kind of credibility of what we're trying to achieve, and is it aligned with science, and does it match what we need to do in terms of getting to that end destination. And I would say, for me personally, I feel like we're in a point where we know the destination. It's more about the pace now, because we as a business have lots of solutions that we can offer customers, lots of different ways that we can solve the problem. It's the actors around us that we're playing with that we need to now bring together and get that pace going to get everybody confident that there's solutions available today. So yeah, it's a big playground at the moment. It's very exciting.
And James, from your perspective?
So I think for the government, a lot of it comes down to obviously regulating and trying to do it in sensible ways, trying to send out the right incentives to various different markets. I think it's somewhere where in the UK, the government's been genuinely on the front foot. I think with the, in my sector in transport, the Transport Decarbonisation Plan, which was published, a little bit of delay, but published very recently, which sets out a range of commitments across all of the modes, and varying degree of different commitments around the 2030s up to 2040 for basically decarbonising transport and in a variety of different ways. So we regulate, and I think that helps, across all of the different sectors, including freight logistics and buses. But we also invest a lot in innovation where the market isn't quite ready. or there's good reason to collaborate between government and the market. I think the government is investing a lot in digital technologies, in zero emissions vehicles technologies, automation, connectivity, all the rest of it. And I think that's really important. And investing in public assets. So obviously we keep investing in the road network, but we also, alongside it, we invest in electric vehicle charging infrastructure and new ways of charging transport, like hydrogen energy, which there's a hub up in Teesside going to be constructed soon, and it's trying to give the market what it needs to take those steps forward, and trying to give the right incentives and right regulations to allow businesses to do the innovative stuff.
So on regulation specifically, would you say, as we sit here now, is regulation helping your advancement, or is it a blocker? Are there elements of regulation that, wouldn't it be great if ... If you had that magic wand, what would be the big unblockers for you within your strategies?
Well, I think what the government's done well is draw some fairly very clear lines in the sand in terms of targets around emissions, decarbonisation for transport, and the markets react to that, and they have reacted. Some of the more historic regulations that we've got, you don't write a government act or a piece of secondary legislation thinking about the 30 years ahead. So we've got quite a lot of regulation written many decades ago, which isn't quite right. I think, without wanting to preempt where we go in the months ahead, I think there's an appetite, and we're being pushed for it to create a new set of regulations for future transport to try and unlock a lot of these benefits. We recognise that what we've got at the moment is quite, combustion engine focused, quite roads focused, and actually the future of transport is a range of new ways of getting around where kind of new regulatory framework is going to be needed.
Just to add to that, I think the TDP, it was welcomed. It's a fantastic piece of work, and it's bringing together transportation in the same room, in the sense of the modes and heavy goods vehicles, buses and coaches, everything all together. But they all represent a very different challenge. So for me, it's encouraging to see them all in the same place, but they all need to be dealt with in different ways. So particularly looking at trucks, like trucks are heavy duty vehicles. They're there to do a job. They're quite often doing different jobs for different missions, and the policy sometimes can be a bit it can follow in the journey of the car, for example. It's set in its position of where it's going, whereas actually for trucks, we hear about kind of consultations about end of sale dates and different things coming out. But exactly like James has said, when you get beneath the poster kind of policies that are coming out, and you get down to like your regulations on moving fuel, ironically, and things like that with batteries, you start going down to that level, and that's exactly where we get the issues. The policy underneath needs to be reformed. And I think for me, we talk a lot about infrastructure. The TDP talks about it. Infrastructure for trucks is pretty much non-existent, For cars, it's getting there. There's lots of stuff out there around cars, electrifying the public roads, and everything that's happened on with residential charging. For trucks, there's plenty of charging out there with the right power. You try and get a heavy goods vehicle into that charging slot, not a chance, And this is where the planning conversation comes in, Are we thinking about the practicalities of rolling out £1 billion worth of infrastructure that doesn't suit a heavy goods vehicle? How are we going to crack that challenge? It's kind of where we're at.
And this is obviously such a fast-changing space, and the pace of news and the pace of change is relentless when you talk about alternative fuels, when you talk about electrification. And for me personally, having only joined the industry only 6 months ago, my background is actually in retail. Every day I see something different, and a different angle, be that from an NGO, be that from a government, be that from an influential, high-profile individual. How do your organisations keep up with all the changes in terms of public perception, in terms of the energy crisis that we saw yesterday, come out in the headlines over the last few days even? How do you remain agile in the face of such changes and such fast-moving updates?
I mean, for me, it's like having a lot of friends. I mean, we basically have to map all of these stakeholders and have really good relationships. I mean, over the last 5 years, that map has grown. When you move from alternative fuels, renewable fuels, into electrification, the supply chain and the partners that you need to work with is huge, and the way that we keep agile and keep at the forefront of that is working with the partners, because we sell the truck. We don't provide the energy, we don't provide the infrastructure. So working with those key partners is absolutely it's essential, because they're the ones that are working in that space, working with government on infrastructure and regulation for fuels and energy, and we need to be the ones that are there with them, having the conversation about the product, but together we get the information and we can move quickly, So partners for me, absolutely essential, collaboration. And traditionally we're not kind of in that space, diesel truck, off the shelf, off you go, we don't have to worry about that. Whereas in this new space, whether it's a renewable fuel or it's a battery electric vehicle, we have to integrate with all the other things that are going on around us. So that conversation is always more than just Scania, it's always the fuel supplier, it's always the infrastructure supplier, and it's always the regulator, We've created a huge amount of dialogue with government in the last few years on trucks. So that's how we progress, really.
I think that's a really good point, and if I'm going to be completely honest, I don't think, the government in the UK was terribly good at that 10 years ago. When I first joined the department, it was very, very, very modally focused, very siloed. Still is quite modally focused and quite siloed, but less so than it used to be. And I think, governments can be a great unblocker, but they can also be the number one barrier. The law is a slow-moving thing, so, regulation, talking about being dynamic and keeping up, it's really tricky. People talk about flexible regulations, but when you come to do it in practice, the legislative tools you've got, without going down a very boring rabbit hole, they don't lend themselves to flexibility. Parliament and governments don't like flexible regulations. I like to know that written on the face of this piece of legislation is exactly what it says it's going to be, not some kind of woolly, well, we want a bit of wriggle room for the future. And that's tricky. The department, though, is getting much better. When I first joined, there was about 2 people who worked in anything to do with innovation. There's vast teams doing it now, and we're much better linked up and much better at seeing the common trends and opportunities. So, if you're investing in renewables, then how can you use that in a bus? How can you use it in a truck, etc.? If you're looking at digital infrastructure and connected vehicles, giving priority to a HGV. At Hinkley Point, to pick up on the previous panel, at Hinkley Point, we've got smart traffic lights letting the HGVs through to reduce carbon output. So same technology can go into a car, can go into an e-scooter, for example. And on that last point of e-scooters, it's an example of, it sounds a sort of trivial one, but given you have an excellent company in Voi from Sweden, it's probably worth mentioning. In the UK, it so happens because of the regulations that we've got in place from many, many years ago, that e-scooters are essentially illegal to ride on the public highway or a pavement. That just happened to happen. People are still riding them. So we had a set of regulations which weren't keeping up with how people were voting with their feet and going out and buying e-scooters. To try and kind of catch up, we ended up creating a set of national trials which are running at the moment, and Voi, the Swedish company, are part of that. But we're moving quite seriously behind the curve of where people want to be. So I think we're still part of the problem often.
And then one final question before we get some questions from the audience. In terms of your workforce, your people, in terms of transforming them and creating that advocacy, creating that evangelism around the future of mobility, the future of alternative fuels, in such established organisations, and James, you touched upon, how difficult it can be to change, legislation and some of the processes behind that. And Tanya, obviously, a very established business with years of grand history behind it. How do you create that change? How do you shift and turn that kind of super tanker culturally, internally, and are you seeing that come through in kind of in the next generation, let's say, joining your organisations?
I mean, for me, the company itself, it's embedded in the company, the kind of culture of sustainability. We've got core values, so you kind of join Scania and you already have that within you anyway, I think, as an employee. But I think the strategy that we've set for the next 5 years, the Driving the Shift strategy, yes, it's a very corporate strategy and there are lots of things that feed into that. But when you go right down to employee level, a bit like the name of today's conference, it's all about impact. And that's, for me, where we've tried to stand still and really explain to our staff and our employees, what does this mean for our business and what does this mean for you individually? So a couple of years ago, we actually we paused the whole business for a whole hour globally, stopped production, stopped everything, stood still, and just took the time to reflect on what we were actually trying to achieve as a business. And I mean, it was the most fascinating thing that we ever done, because it made everybody stand still and take the time to think about it. Because I think we're all busy, we're all trying to do our job and get on with life. And to stop the whole business and sit and talk about it, and almost have a workshop and give everybody the opportunity to put an idea across, and then to take that idea and then become and create a plan for you as an individual or you as your team. That's how we've kind of made that impact, because we've now got a global strategy and a global direction, but at a very local level, everybody on an individual scale has contributed to our sustainability plans. So they've put an action forward and we've accounted that action, and it's within a local plan. So for me, it's all about individual action. And I think if you feel part of that and you're sat with business and you can make your own contribution, you're all moving together in a revolution. It's a great feeling. So it's got to go that way, I think.
Lovely.
So I think in a government department, the dynamics are probably slightly different, but
oh, James, what a shame.
but it has to be said.
Don't be so hard on yourself.
Yeah, don't be so hard.
10 years ago, it'd potentially be difficult to start a career in the Department for Transport and feel like you've got a kind of guilt-free 10 years ahead. If you're working on rollout of roads or whatever it might be. But absolutely, the kind of strategic priorities which are set out and clearly, put out there for everyone to see are all about sustainability. Very clear environmental targets, accessibility, and safety. And I think you can't get behind that stuff. And as I say, I think creativity has really crept in, and innovation in the department over the last 5-10 years in a way, which it was there before, but not at such a scale. I would also say working with stakeholders from industry more, possibly more than we used to, being a bit more open book about what we do, more consultative in a genuine way, because the innovation will tend to happen outside of government departments, sorry to say, but trying to embrace it and support them, and that's good fun.
Lovely, thank you both. We've got a couple of minutes as we head hurtling towards lunch, so I think we've got time for a few questions, I believe. Anyone wants to kick off? We've got one towards the middle there at the back.
Hi, so I'm the marketing manager from Husqvarna, and we've got a similar challenge, I would probably say, with Volvo and Scania in terms of driving that change externally. So we all live and breathe sustainability and changing our products for the better. But how do you change that in terms of your external stakeholders? So whether that's dealerships, end users, etc. How are you finding that transition to get them as passionate as you are about the change?
I mean, for me, it's all about bringing them along the journey, Like, if we're innovating and we're teaching and we're learning, let's bring our stakeholders with us, Don't exclude anyone from the knowledge, Like, if we're on that journey, let's do it together. I think quite often we want the perfect position, Let's present it when it's perfect. No, let's present it when it's not perfect and work it out together. And I think that's where I have the most fun, because we can all sit together in the same room and then the ideas just flow, because there's different agendas and there's different objectives going on. So for me, it's everybody has to appreciate that we don't have the perfect answer. We've got to work together to find that solution. And And then also it's about education, you know, like for us, we have so many solutions. It's not just, oh, we have an electric truck, you know, it's we have an electric truck, we have a biogas truck, we have a bio-LNG truck, we have biodiesel, you know, and you start reeling out all of the solutions, and it can be quite scary, because people need to understand that for us, we have so many different applications that the education around what we can offer is the piece that we need to grow. Because I think when people start understanding what is available, for me, it's all about how much diesel can we displace and how quickly can we do it. It doesn't matter what technology we use to do that, it's about getting to that end goal and using the right solution right now. So it's a big piece of work, but a lot of education, I would say.
For me, there's a fine line between talking about sustainability as one of your core values as a tick box exercise, and actually living and breathing it and having it as the red thread through everything that you do, and actually embodying it day to day. It's very difficult. From a Volvo perspective, we have an investor conference next week with all our retailers, and rather than headline with the usual commercial numbers and all the great exciting graphs and charts that the investors would be super interested in, we're actually headlining with our sustainability message, which is the first time we've done that. Again, there's a fine line between doing that authentically and it seeming gimmicky, but I think if you continue to embody it in your day-to-day, and it's always present in your conversations and all the way through to your kind of bottom line day-to-day processes in terms of removing paper, from retailer processes in which the automotive sector has lots of paper, then slowly you start to create that authenticity and that evangelism, and your brand starts to be associated more readily with that sustainability message. So that's the Volvo perspective. I think, unfortunately, we're out of time. If there are any further questions we can take offline, we would do so with pleasure. Allow me to thank Tanya and James for their time today and their contributions, and thank you for your participation.
Thank you, Ben, Tanya.